Well, I will respond very briefly. I'm very grateful to my three distinguished colleagues for raising such interesting and important points. And I think if I could just make a few points which I think will be helpful in this discussion. One of them is that in my book, certainly I look at some past controversies. I think we have to do that because in any discussion about the relationship between science and faith, the shadows of history are always there. We're always looking back at things that happened and those influence present discussions. But we can't live in the past. I think we need to be absolutely clear that there are issues to be debated right now. But I do think sometimes we can learn from past mistakes or past successes, and those may be useful in thinking about how we respond to these things today. I think another thing I want to say is that although I do believe that science and religion ought to talk to each other, and that there's all kinds of possibilities of dialogue with politicians and others, that actually there is a question of professional expertise here. And I think that it is right for theologians to try and articulate a vision. And we might ask, what sort of vision might that be? And I think here, there's one point which is, I think, really quite helpful in relation to some of the points that were so usefully raised by my distinguished correspondents here. One of them is this. Richard Dawkins and I disagree on many things, but one of the things we do agree on is that science isn't very good at articulating values. And if you take a theological framework and ask, what does that tell us about our relationship with the natural world, then the kind of framework you get is something like this. This is not our world. We live in it, but we don't own it. It's been entrusted to us by God, but it is God's. It's God's treasured possession, and we are the ones who have been given the responsibility of taking care of it and passing it on to the next generation. So it doesn't answer the question, what should we do? But it does give you a framework for realizing that we have to do something. So I think that that's a helpful way of just beginning that discussion, of giving you a framework within which a very important ethical and scientific and, of course, political discussion may take place. I think that the final point that I'd like to make simply is this, that I think that there are very few people who can integrate in one person a variety of disciplines. But it is nevertheless true that in any kind of interdisciplinary discussion, the kind of people who have credibility in another discipline are very often those who have taken the trouble to find out something about it. And I'm not saying theologians should become scientists or anything like that. I'm just saying that a kind of expansion of our understanding does really help make the kind of conversations that have been mentioned in the three respondents' discussions much more interesting and important. So I think that we mustn't lose focus. A climate scientist must stay a climate scientist. I want to make that absolutely clear. And likewise, a theologian needs to stay a theologian. But a theologian who understands something about climate science is going to be a much more welcome participant in these discussions. And I think that is something which is helpful just in getting these discussions underway. If my little book helps in any way, I'll be delighted. But as I was saying, in many ways, I'm looking at where we have been. And of course, as my three colleagues have rightly pointed out, the real question is, where will we be in 5 or 10 years' time? And we don't know. But I think one of the greatest marks of intelligence is this, an ability to learn from the past. And maybe by looking at what happened beforehand, might just give us some clues about how we might respond in the future. Thank you.